I think what I'll do now, there's more on there, but it's more of the same. And what I think I'll do now is jump from there to Nepal and show you what the women in Nepal did, because it represents an important shift. And that even when we changed from film to video in our work in Newfoundland and Labrador, it was the extension person, the intervener, who was still in control of the technology and who handled the equipment. In Nepal, we trained 10 mountain women from a fairly remote western mountain region called the Sirket region. Many of these women had never seen moving images before. All of them were illiterate, but they had been chosen by the Nepalese government through its Women's Development Division to become field workers to help other mountain women to look at ways to increase their returns in their activities in growing things or in making crafts or whatever. And it was for enhancing their productivity and especially their credit for that productivity. And an organization in Kathmandu called Worldview International Foundation had the contract to take video equipment out there and to get them involved in this process. But they subcontracted us to train them in this in the Fogo process. We didn't train them to use the cameras, but we helped advise Worldview International Foundation on how to train the women to use the equipment. As it turned out, the video equipment of today, the kind that Fred is using behind this camera, is simple enough so that anybody can learn the basics of video camera operation. And I'm presuming you're going to be doing some of that yourself this summer. Great fun. And you'll find that it's not all that hard. What's a little trickier is learning to shoot to edit or to shoot material that you want to use later and that you may only be able to edit in the camera or whatever. So some of those techniques take a little longer. The mountain women in Nepal learned to use the equipment very quickly. They relied on WIF, or Worldview International Foundation, to sit with them and actually do the editing with the hands-on editing suite. And with some of that material which happens to be scripted, help them with the scripting as well. They had a man, Padam Lal, who was from their region and who had trained in anthropology. He was Nepalese, who was their equivalent of the social worker or animateur, field worker. And he had a wonderful rapport with the women. There was also a field worker from the women's division. And they together, all worked together. To me, what was exciting was that the women very, very quickly saw that they had a powerful tool at their disposal, which they had not had before. And they immediately created their own agenda. The Women's Development Division of the Nepalese government said, we think you should make videos on kitchen gardens, on irrigation, and on forest preservation. And the women said, well, that's all fine and good, but we want to do a video on traditional medicine. And we want to do one on child abuse and legal advocacy for helping us cope with child abuse and custody of our children. And also, we have some things we want to say to people in Kathmandu that we are too far away from to visit, and they made these so-called video letters. And sent them to Kathmandu. and got responses back in the same way we did here between Fogo and the cabinet. Interestingly, a Norwegian anthropologist in the area at the time said these people are visually illiterate, it'll never work. And it took me a long time to figure out what visually illiterate means, but I think it means that if you look at an image, you can't tell whether that's a camel or a flea on the horizon, you know. But in fact, it was a lot of nonsense. People who live in rural areas especially, and those who don't write especially, have very keen visual perception as well as very keen oral traditions and memories. So that, in fact, was not a problem. So I will show you some of the material that they were doing themselves. This is on another format, or standard. Okay. Now this you won't understand, so what I'll do is I'll show segments and then fast forward to the next segments and explain what's going on as we go along. This is the village of Ramgat that we were working in. And these were people who came out of the high mountains and settled on the river. And Ramgat means the Gat is by the side of the river, it's by the river of God, Ram being God. So this video they made tells about the history of how they came to settle in this community and how they'd been up in the high mountains. This is at about 4,500 feet, so it's in the foothills. And they're saying, we came from out of the mountains 15 years ago and settled here at Ramgat. And when we first arrived, the soil was very rich and we did very well. But with constant tilling, the quality of our soil has deteriorated, and we have real problems now with water. And then they started to talk about even our drinking water, except for a few springs in the mountains, comes from the nearby river, and it's not very clean. This is called Our Community, Our Health. But the women themselves, who were trained, shot this. And you can see it's nice long shots, lots of good close-up shooting too, which is, a lot of people don't realize how effective that can be when they move in close like that. And now here they're saying, we have our own traditional healers and medicine, and this is one of our healers who has his own ways, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And while he's very good, we also need a health clinic and a nurse and some drugs and some assistance. And these are some of the women that we train. They are all mountain women with no formal education. She is a goldsmith, this woman. There's more gold in Nepal and India than there is anywhere else in the world. It's all worn by the women in the communities. That's their wealth. So now the women are talking about their health problems to each other, while one of their own is also filming them. I'll let this one run through because there's some nice cohesion to it. I'm going to try to get this subtitled one of these days. But what these women would do also is that they all had little 5-inch field monitors that ran off batteries, and you can carry it under your arm. And they would trundle off to the different wards in their district, in their panchayat, and they would go into a house and sit down with their friends and show some of these videotapes, and they became teachers.